Not many Supreme Court justices become famous. Antonin Scalia is one of the few. Known as Nino to his friends and colleagues, he is one of the most brilliant and combative justices ever to sit on the court, and one of the most prominent legal thinkers of his generation. He first agreed to talk to us last spring about a new book he's written about how lawyers should address the court. But over the course of several conversations, our story grew into a full-fledged profile, his first major television interview, including discussions about abortion and Bush v. Gore. At 72, Justice Scalia is still a maverick, championing a philosophy known as originalism, which means interpreting the Constitution based on what it originally meant to the people who ratified it over 200 years ago. Justice Scalia has no patience with so-called activist judges who create rights not in the Constitution, like a right to abortion, by interpreting the Constitution as a living document that adapts to changing values. Well, what's wrong with the living Constitution? What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with it is it's wonderful imagery, and it puts me on the defensive as defending presumably a dead Constitution.
Well,
it is an enduring Constitution that I want to defend.
But what you're saying is let's try to figure out the mindset of people back 200 years ago, right?
It isn't the mindset. It's what did the words mean to the people who ratified the Bill of Rights or who ratified the Constitution?
As opposed to what people today think it means.
As opposed to what people today would like.
But you do admit that values change. We do adapt. We move.
That's fine. And so do laws change. Because values change, legislatures abolish the death penalty, permit same-sex marriage if they want, abolish laws against homosexual conduct. That's how the change in a society occurs. Society doesn't change through a constitution.
He's on a mission as an evangelist for originalism at home and around the world.
Welcome, Justice Antonin Scalia.
Here he is at the Oxford Union in England.
Sometimes people come up to me and inquire, Justice Scalia, when did you first become an originalist? As though it's some weird affliction. When did you start eating human flesh?
They may be laughing, but in the U.S., Justice Scalia is a polarizing figure.
Scalia is a fascist!
Who invites protesters and picketers. There haven't been many Supreme Court justices who become this much of a lightning rod. I'm surprised at how many people really, really hate you. These are some things we've been told. He's evil. He's a Neanderthal. He's going to drag us back to 1789. They're threatened by what you represent and what you believe in.
These are people that don't understand what my interpretive philosophy is. I'm not saying no progress. I'm saying we should progress democratically. You think there ought to be a right to abortion? No problem. The Constitution says nothing about it. Create it the way most rights are created in a democratic society. Pass a law. And that law, unlike a constitutional right to abortion created by a court, can compromise. It can see. Oh, I was going to say it can split the baby. I should not use. A constitution is not meant to facilitate change. It is meant to impede change, to make it difficult to change.
But his critics argue that originalism is a cover for what they see as Justice Scalia's real intention to turn back some pivotal court decisions of the 60s and 70s. You've been labeled a counter-revolutionary.
A counter-revolutionary.
The idea being...
Sounds exciting.
The critics say his aim is to undo Roe v. Wade and affirmative action and allow more religion in public life. The public sense of you is that you make your decisions based on your social beliefs or what? That is the perception.
I'm a law and order guy. I mean, I confess I'm a social conservative, but it does not affect my views on cases.
His philosophy has occasionally led him to decisions he deplores, like his upholding the constitutionality of flag burning, as he told a group of students in Missouri.
If it was up to me, I would have thrown bearded, sandal-wearing flag burner into jail. But it was not up to me.
To Scalia, flag burning was protected by the Founding Fathers in the First Amendment, which is his only criterion, he says, under originalism.
But do you respect that there is another way to look at this?
You know the story of the Baptist preacher who was asked if he believed in total immersion baptism, and he said, "Believe in it? Why, I've seen it done." I have to say the same thing about your question. There must be other views because I've seen them.
Yeah, but you respect them. You don't, do you?
I respect the people who have them, but I think those views are just flat out wrong.
He's talking about some of his fellow justices, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a liberal who is, and this never ceases to surprise people, one of his best friends, both on and off the court.
I see the Constitution as striving for a more perfect union.
To her, the Constitution evolves and should reflect changes in society. That going back to what was meant originally when they wrote, for instance, "We the People," makes little sense.
Who were we the people in 1787? You would not be among we the people. African Americans would not be among the people.
Justice Ginsburg and you disagree.
We do indeed.
Lots of things. And yet you're such good friends.
I attack ideas, I don't attack people. And some very good people have some very bad ideas. and if you can't separate the two, you got to get another day job. You don't want to be a judge, at least not a judge on a multi-member panel.
He's one of the best writers on the panel, known for a bold and colorful style. He told us he has to work at it. It doesn't come easy.
You sometimes quote Cole Porter,
I do.
A West Side Story, you go to the Greek tragedies. But you said you do it because
it makes the opinion interesting, which might induce somebody to read it.
But he can also use his pen as a sword to attack the writings of his colleagues. For instance, he once called a Breyer decision sheer applesauce.
He's thrown some of those zingers your way.
Oh, yes.
One of your opinions he called absurd. Another he called implausible speculation. Another self-righteous. On and on.
How about this opinion is not to be taken seriously? He wrote that about Justice O'Connor, not
Justice O'Connor, right?
Yeah. He's rather mild, I think, in the adjectives that he uses for me. But you can take every one of those words, run his opinions, and you'll see that all of us are implausible when we disagree with him.
But do you ever take it personally?
No, I take it as a challenge. How am I going to answer this in a way that's a real put down?
I'm trying to figure out if there was ever real anger.
I would say exasperation is the word. As annoyed as you might be about his zinging dissent, he is so utterly charming, so amusing, so sometimes outrageous. But you can't help but saying, I'm glad that he's my friend or he's my colleague.
What's interesting is the difference between how you appear in person and the image that you have. Because the writings are so often combative. And your friends say that you're charming and fun.
I could be charming and combative at the same time. What's contradictory between the two? I love to argue. I've always loved to argue. And I love to point out the weaknesses of the opposing arguments. It may well be that I'm something of a shin kicker. It may well be that I'm something of a contrarian.
Of all the cases that have come before him on the court, Bush v. Gore may have been the most controversial. It has been reported that he played a pivotal role in urging the other justices to end the Florida recount, thereby handing the 2000 election to George Bush. The subject came up at the Oxford Union.
Supposing yourself as a Supreme Court justice were granted the power to appoint the next president of the United States, who would you pick and why? And would he or she be better than your last choice?
You want to talk about Bush versus Gore? I perceived that. I and my court owe no apology whatever for Bush versus Gore. We did the right thing, so there.
People say that that decision was not based on judicial philosophy, but on politics.
I say nonsense.
Was it political?
Gee, I really don't want to get in. I mean, get over it. It's so old by now. The principal issue in the case, whether the scheme that the Florida Supreme Court had put together violated the federal Constitution, that wasn't even close. The vote was 7-2.
Moreover, he says it was not the court that made this a judicial question.
It was Al Gore who made it a judicial question. It was he who brought it into the Florida courts. We didn't go looking for trouble. It was he who said, I want this to be decided by the courts. What are we supposed to say? Oh, not important enough.
But it was it ended up being a political decision. It ended up in effect.
You say that. I don't say that.
You don't think it handed the election to George Bush?
Well, how does that make it a political decision?
It decided the election.
Oh, I see. If that's all you mean by it, yes.
That's all I mean by it.
Okay. I suppose it did. Although you should add to that it would have come out the same way no matter what.
The justice has been explaining his positions publicly more and more, and even delving into some thorny issues, like torture.
I don't like torture. Although defining it is going to be a nice trick, but I mean, who's in favor of it? Nobody. And we have a law against torture. But if everything that is hateful and odious is not covered by some provision of the Constitution.
If someone's in custody, as in Abu Ghraib, and they are brutalized by a law enforcement person, if you listen to the expression cruel and unusual punishment, doesn't that apply?
No.
Cruel and unusual punishment.
To the contrary, you think that you would. Has anybody ever referred to torture as punishment? I don't think so.
Well, I think if you're in custody and you have a policeman who's taken you into custody.
And you say he's punishing you?
Sure.
What's he punishing you for? You punish somebody.
Well, because he assumes you either committed a crime or that you know something that he wants to know.
It's the latter. And when he's hurting you in order to get information from you, you don't say he's punishing you. What's he punishing you for?
Because he thinks you're a terrorist and he's going to beat the you-know-what out of
Anyway, that's my view, and it happens to be correct.
He's nothing if not certain and confident. How did he get that way? Where and how the justice grew up? When we come back.